on exclusive director's commentary. This time I'm going to go over the French toast episode. I think it's kind of enjoyable. There's a couple little things on here I've kind of not really expressed fully, but I mean, it's a YouTube video. You can't do much. But, anyways, let's get started here. I'll walk you guys through a lot of the choices that were made, a lot of the reasons why, and maybe some extra detail as to why the topic is expressed the way that it is. So, as with all YouTube, your first 5 seconds is what's going to make or break the audience. In this case, sad looking dog is probably the best one I can think of. Like, I always liked having things as a common thing. So the first 15 seconds always show the dogs, the chair moving up. I talk in the beginning about my parents' divorce when I was a kid and how my dad taught me some cooking. It's one of those little things. I try to put a bit of myself into each one of these videos. It's a bit of a humanizing thing here. I really don't feel like telling you how awesome I am and how alfalfa I am. The whole point of these things isn't so much to be convincing myself how great I am. It's about showing you a real human being taking real decisions for real life. This is where we talk about Operation Scorched Earth. I framed it so the dogs get up to see about the toast right as I talk about Operation Scorched Earth. The idea is it shows that you're going to have some interest in the topic and everybody's getting into it. Here you got your obligatory shot where you show guys what you're getting into. French toast has never been really a very good breakfast for health, like for guys who are bodybuilding or just on a general cut. So I kind of like how I do it with that little bit of cottage cheese in the side. To me, it gives kind of a nod to, even though you're going to indulge yourself, you still have work to do. Plus, that sour savoriness taste really works well with it. Little error there. You can see the ring light very clearly. Another error there with that trade on action. It should have stopped as soon as it flipped over and not as it came back. I think I was using still one camera shots here. So for a lot of the stuff, I'm filming it twice and then splicing them together. What I've tried in later videos is a second camera. I use a GoPro or my phone with 1080p. In this one, I believe I was setting it up for, was it 60 frames a minute? But it's something you're going to notice. Here, let me go back. When you look at the pepper and the salt, it kind of has that sports footage. You see that where it's almost like a series of really high-res photos. You can see the grains coming in. It's kind of a neat look. I don't know if it's fitting here, though. So using these high frame rates might be a good thing if you want to show a lot of action, but it kind of misses that whole thematic theme of the 24 frames a minute. It's just one of those things. It's hard to explain, but it's very easy to show. And I guess on the topic, it's Operation Scorched Earth. It's essentially like guys don't have any dignity. They really don't. And when you get to the point where somebody disrespects you, and I don't want to mean it like in the Jersey Shore way, I mean a disrespect as in taking for granted or advantage of your own self-dignity, it's really hard to walk back from that. And as much as, I mean, I had a client who was 14 years, two very successful professionals, and his wife just up and decided to cheat because she was bored and he wasn't doing it the way he used to be. Now, I'm not going to say blah, blah, blah. He's nothing to blame. He was perfect. She wasn't. It's not the point of it. But relationships, because of necessity, they used to be about people putting up with everything. Like, yeah, thick and thin, for better or for worse shit. It's not there anymore. And so really the only strategy to play on this one is tit for tat. If somebody crosses your boundaries to that extent, you've got to just nuke the entire thing. And that really has two... Ooh, I'll get back to that. So if you notice in this one, I do a lot of just dissolve cuts. It's not really the choice I would normally take. I usually prefer cutting on action or cutting on movement. But in this case, I kind of like how it had more of a whimsical, nostalgic feel to it. The music was a constant choice, by the way. So I'm talking about my childhood at the beginning, my parents' divorce. The idea of having this more down-tempo trance kind of tune in the background gives this whole thing almost a historical, nostalgic feel to it. Almost like this was me reminiscing about my dad teaching me how to make French toast in the past. It's a subtle thing, but you kind of catch on to it. Same as even the clothing choice in this one. I just went with something simple, a t-shirt and jeans. The idea is that's kind of what the dads in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s used to wear. My dad was in his underwear around the house a lot, but the whole thing kind of paints a subtext of thinking back to the past and then realizing the rules don't apply because it's juxtaposed with the message of when your girl disrespects you enough, you just nuke the entire relationship, and it's on her to come call and or to claw back in your life. It's a subtle thing, and you probably don't notice it. And before I had explained it, you probably would have never even thought about it. But it's neat. Once it affects the way you view the video. You can't really pinpoint it, but it's the reason that marketing is so good is that it taps into certain emotions on a very subtle way. So in this case, you may be thinking about times of things you did with your dad, you went and played catch, whatever it is you did. And it puts you in that nostalgic mindset. So you're more receptive to these kind of things. And then you realize maybe you had parents that were married for 30 plus years and they had a really great time of it. And it's just not that way anymore. And this is your way of kind of reconciling the way you thought relationships were for your whole life, or maybe the way your parents gave you an example of, reconciling that with the way things are now. Another mistake right there. You can see me with my phone. I had an error on these ones where you'll constantly see the focus zooming in and out. And that's because you can't set autofocus on when you use your phone as the remote for the camera. So I can't view my dailies and keep the autofocus on. And in that case, you can see it on the video where I'm moving the phone around. I'm actually watching the background to make sure the frame is framed properly. Another thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing these, if you're doing your own videos, the rule of threes. If you'll notice, let me go back to when I was facing the background. Rule of threes. Rule of threes mean you should always have 1/3 of the frame as your subject and then 2/3 of the frame without. So if you'll notice, I'm generally off-centered on the frame, which is slightly asymmetrical. It creates a tension. For those who are jazz music fans, you might know this. Actually, how best to describe this? Have you ever listened to a tune and noticed that you can kind of guess the way the tune is going as you're listening to it? Well, that's because it's a very comfortable tune. And a lot of top 40 does that. You can sing along with it even if you've never heard it before. The thing that jazz music did, and it's really an interesting phenomenon, is they play with that. They play notes that are off. So if you're expecting an A, it'll play an A flat. And that makes a little bit of an anxiety in your head. What they call it is tension. And then by the end of the chord progression, it ends up going back to a note that you were expecting. So it builds tension, it releases tension. It's push and pull. It's exactly the same thing we do as pickup artists. And this is a subtle thing. You probably don't even notice it. Even when I mention it, you're going to keep looking for it, but you might not feel it on a conscious level. So the rule of threes is a very symmetrical thing. I'm in the center, 1/3, 1/3 on either side. I push myself slightly off, and it creates a tension in your head, and that tension you need to solve. And this creates interest. It's the difference between making an interesting video and an uninteresting video. And in this case, when we do the transition switch, it's back to a more symmetrical shot of just the pan entirely in frame. So it creates tension, releases tension. And this is one of those things that I wish guys would take when they're seducing women, flirting with their wives. Everybody treats it like you need to be logical, symmetrical. You have to be consistent and predictable. It's the worst thing you can do. Being unpredictable is an attractive quality, and it doesn't take much. It's a standard economic practice. They figured it out when they were talking about baseball pitchers, where if they change up their standard pitching style 25% of the time, that's all it takes for somebody to consider them completely unpredictable. So yeah, I'm just sitting here making some French toast. But the takeaway from this, is you just go slightly off kilter, maybe a quarter of the time, and it's enough to keep your girl guessing. And a girl that's guessing is a girl that's interested. It's chick crack. It's the same reason that a girl will flash her cleavage to you and give you that imagination that, oh, I could totally have my face in there. It's the same thing, but from a female sensibility. It's these little things that make you more attractive, and I love when I get to add them subtly and carefully into these videos. Well, we're gonna skip ahead here anyways because I'm done talking about that. So tension release, tension release. We get back to it. I basically had to screw around with these things forever because I had the heat on lower because I had to film a couple minutes worth, so I didn't want to burn them. Worst thing you can have is burning food on a cooking channel because I don't want to have to make 15 copies of this. That one there, I had these things cooked about 10-15 minutes ago. I had to put them back in the pan, film a second shot so I could show that transition and make it seamless. Again, editing is all about the lies. Just like when you're dealing with women. They love being lied to. Just make the lie obvious. Think of it like male makeup. Got tons of analogies on this one. Even when you know a girl's wearing makeup, it's still attractive. And like I said here, I add a little cottage cheese to this thing. I could use sour cream. I could use just a little bit more milk when I make it. I like the cottage cheese. It gives a nod to, yeah, you're going to have French toast right now, but you still got to work out in the morning, so get your protein in. Same thing there with butter. It's something, and I know it sounds like something your grandma would do. This is back to cooking, by the way. I have a butter dish, a little Le Creuset butter dish. I like having butter in there that's room temperature. It just makes it easier for these spreadable, quick applications like this. So in this case, that's why I had to use the spoon to apply it. A lot of people like taking that pad of butter that's perfectly square from the fridge. I don't like it because it cools down your meal too much and it doesn't melt. So you end up eating a stick of butter while you're eating your frickin' French toast, whatever. And there you go again. You see this with the higher frame rates. And this is why I've gone since then to 24 frames a minute where it's just too pretty. Oh, I'm going to go back to that. See, that is it's too clean. I don't like it. I need a certain element of dirtiness to the frame. I would kill if I found a way for a DSLR to replicate that film grain that you had in like 80s movies. And then this is just me showing off. I don't know why. I really like those kind of edits because it adds to the whimsy of this thing and it kind of gives a wink to you guys that, yeah, just so you know, I'm not sitting here and this is not a documentary. This is me telling a story. It's my way of giving you a little wink to the audience. Then I know, what else can we talk about here? I guess the last part's on Scorched Earth. There's really something about a guy who's willing to do an irrational reaction to something. The problem with predictable people is that they're very manipulatable. If a girl knows she can screw up, and as long as she feels really sad and fucks you really good, that you'll take her back, she has no incentive to change her behavior to fit your needs. You've let her know that you're willing to put up with it. But my girl, or anybody's girl for that example, oh yeah, I guess I could add grain in post. The nice thing you can do here is you let her know, if you cross my boundary, I will go nuclear on this relationship. I don't care if I lose the house. I don't care if I lose the kids. You're treating your dignity as the most important thing. And the thing is, by you establishing you're treating your dignity as more important than anything, it encourages others that want you in their life to start doing the same. And even if they don't, let's say a girl can't stand you, cannot wait to cheat on you with Soccer Chad. It's a much better signal for her to know that you would rather burn your house down and give her half the ashes than it would be for her to act like a damn fool and you'll just roll over and put up with it. It sounds irrational, but it's basic game theory. I think any red pill man should take his time and study game theory. Then I'm going to pause here. I love these don't eat paint warnings. So I don't know if I talked about it in the last video, but it's something hilarious about them. I found that, and I don't want it to sound like some high IQ nerd crap, but people are very ego invested and stupid. I don't mean stupid as in they're not smart. I mean stupid as in they're like willfully trying to be stupid. You can tell 15 guys to go lift weights, and 14 of them will argue that, well, what about cardio? Or what about this? Or what about that? And There's this intrinsic need of guys to argue anything that they're not already doing and doing well. And it got to the point, and it's not even arguing for their own sake. It's often arguing for that surrogate person that they want to defend against. I remember it kind of started with, well, Ryan, what about, what was my example? Actually, it might have been from Scorched Earth when we first started talking about it in the Married Red Pill, but well, Brian, what's going to happen now is a guy's going to all of a sudden nuke his family and his kids and lose things in divorce because you're telling him to like treat his dignity as sacrosanct. And I go, it's a military thing that drove me nuts. It's teaching to the lowest common denominator. Everything was basically taught as if you were the biggest idiot in the room. And it was the most annoying thing. And it prevented everybody but that one idiot from learning. And that one idiot would screw it up anyway. He used to work with that idiot. It was basically like putting him aside while everybody else handles the job. So it was just a huge waste of time on everybody's part. And so I refused to do it. I'm like, look, if you're so stupid that you're going to take this advice literally and nuke your relationship because she burnt the toast that day, well, then you were going to screw up anyway, and I can't be blamed for you not being literate. And it jokingly, and I think it was S-Curve and Rule Zero Dad, they both follow me on Twitter. You've probably seen them on the show once or twice, but they referred to it as like don't eat paint warnings. The same way as kids were told not to eat paint in the 50s and 60s because lead is sweet. Kids were licking the walls and ended up getting brain damage. So I thought it was funny, and I started using it. And in this case, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. I can imagine if I ever make it really big and some mainstream media article wants to do some outrage bait to get some page views by calling me a Nazi or whatever it is they do to people now, that they're going to show this example video, and I could show, yeah, the stuff you were complaining about is exactly what I wrote about in the don't eat paint warning. So you're kind of convincing me you're a retard. Although you can't really say that anymore. I don't know what else to use in its place. Calling somebody aspie just means they're overly literal. I guess moron is the socially acceptable way to say retard now. What do I know? I don't know if anybody reads these warnings, to be honest. I do like them, though. It gives a nice 30 seconds at the end for people to absorb the things in. And the background has the dog screwing around, hanging out. I can't really show a lot of chicks with cleavage on here, and I'm not about to put my wife's boobs up on the internet, so you guys are going to get the nice brown star of the dog staring at you in the meantime. But yeah, in the future, I did it for 1 or 2 videos. I don't think I'm ever going to go with this high frame rate again. It's just, it looks too artificial. And yes, this is artificial, but I don't like it. On that note, that's going to be the end for the director's commentary on French Toast and Operation Scorched Earth. I'll leave you with a few more minutes here. We might as well round out the time by talking about Scorched Earth a bit. If you guys don't know, it's a concept in the Married Red Pill we came up with when guys were going through divorce proceedings. And I kind of figured out from my time in the military, when a guy would get charged, first thing you would do is you run through your theater on it. Almost ran off an Ethernet cord. The guy would, you walk up to the guy, you're like, look, I know you screwed up, just admit everything, you'll do your punishment like a man, and then we'll get you back to work. And it was always this script, and it was a lot of what I called theater, military theater. You feel really bad, like you don't get mad at the guy, you don't yell at the guy, you treat it like you're a father disappointed by his son. And I've yet to do this, and I've yet to see it done when the guy didn't burst into tears at some point in the thing. And there's nothing more awkward than seeing a man cry. But it was part of the deal. And here's what would happen then. The guy would always go back to you because he likes you guys. I mean, your bosses are always good people. You're hard but fair. And they always gave you the same line. Like, look, I just want this to be over. Discomfort sucks. I want less discomfort. I made a note for myself if I was ever put into that situation that I would never be openly manipulated like that. Because what they would do next is they would go and they would confess everything. And you would take a group that had no evidence anything happened. A lot of times a flimsy accusation. I use the example in a post of mine. It's on my blog. I don't know if it's on the old one or the new one, but it's got a picture of a cake with GTFO written on the front. That was a cake I gave to Frenchie. He was a kid I was teaching back in Fleet School who got booted out of the military. Somebody got caught doing cocaine or drugs or something like that, and he told the MPs that a whole bunch of people were at this party. So we all liked the guy. He was a good working kid, always on work on time, model employee, We just assumed he was at the party, but he didn't know this stuff was going on. Nobody would have known if he didn't say anything. But we ran him through this. Don't worry about it. Just put up with your punishment and get back. And so he fessed up to everything after having a good cry. Surprised the hell out of us. I was like, fuck, he should have kept his mouth shut. But military booted him, even though every single one of us, all the way up to the commanding officer, vouched for him. So no good deed goes unpunished. It's a very strong, and it's a shaming tactic. Now, what does this all have to do with Operation Scorched Earth? When guys are going through a divorce, they just want it to end. And they want to make things fair because they love their wife. Even though she's cheating on him, she doesn't want to be around him anymore, and she's going after all of his assets. And by the guy refusing to play this game, she basically gets carte blanche. And I mean, you've heard all the stories. False domestic violence charges, false charges of them playing or them diddling the kids. Anything the girl can throw at the wall just to muddy the waters and make the guy out to be as bad a person as possible in order to get good treatment for the judge. And I've got clients that I've dealt with that have had judges that are going through, I can't remember what the word for it was. I'll have to look it up. It's like an administrative review. It's essentially being put on blast publicly for not judging properly. And there's always the chance you could have the law on your side and you just get one of these vindictive, blue-pilled judges that just respects the women and think you're a loser. The problem with these guys is these are the ones that end up putting a bullet in their mouth. And so Operation Scorched Earth is a way to deal with that. The instant she wants out of your relationship by screwing some other dude or putting divorce papers out on you, you play for blood. I will burn this all to the ground unless I get what I want out of it. And that establishes very quickly that you're not to be messed with, but not in a flexing way. This is not a threat. This is just the reality of the situation. You'll rather burn it down than give it away. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a guarantee that things are all going to go your way, but what it does do is it establishes you're not going to be messed with. You're not going to be rolled over. You're not going to have a boot on your neck. It's that little way of taking back your dignity that really does help with men's lives. So, feel free, watch Scorched Earth again. Take a look through, notice the parts where I made some technical errors, notice some parts where I made conscious, creative decisions. Try to look at the subtext of these things when you watch them from now on, because I am really trying to tell two stories here. There's the one I'm talking about, and then there's the one I'm not talking about. And if you can understand both, you're going to come a long way in being a better storyteller, being more attractive, and better able to manage your women. So on that note, there's a bunch of new Patreon guys this month. I want to welcome you guys to the channel. This is just one of the things that I'm starting to do on there. So stay tuned. I believe I want to do a red pilled coffee video on this Thursday. And we got Red Morning again on the weekend. So I'll catch you guys later.